Hi everybody, this is Same But Different, and today joined with me we have Silvia. So happy to have you here.
Thank you. My name is Silvia, and I am a 28-year-old Egyptian girl with a slightly complicated background.
We love that.
Yes. I was born in Dubai, born and raised, and I lived there for 20 years. And then I temporarily moved to New York City, but then this move became permanent, and now I live in New York. I graduated from interior design, but I started my platform MEN WEIN, and it discusses cultural elements from each one of my backgrounds. And I'm using it as a sort of a healing process to accept the mix that I am.
I think that's so cool and well explained. Maybe before we get into it, could you explain to those people who don't speak Arabic, what does MEN WEIN mean?
Yes. So MEN WEIN is actually like Lebanese. It's not Egyptian Arabic. And it means from where or where from. That's basically like what my platform is about. And it's just exploring like my different cultures and like everything that I've grown up, because growing up in Dubai, I was exposed to the Emirati culture a lot. And I never lived in Egypt, but I am Egyptian because my parents are Egyptian. And obviously, like, we used to go to Egypt every summer, and they're very, very much Egyptian. I came to New York, and I think I've been here for like, I'm not very new. I think it's been like 9 or 10 years. Which I can't believe because like time flies.
Absolutely.
So I also include like the American culture because I'm exposed to it, and it obviously, like, living in New York has changed me. So MEN WEIN is like everything. It's just like a mix of everything.
Well, yeah, because that's basically what you are, kind of like a cocktail of these different cultures now. And so did MEN WEIN, or did the idea of MEN WEIN come in New York, or did you already have the idea when you lived in the Emirates?
No, it definitely came like when I was here, because when I was living in Dubai, it was my only home. Like, I didn't think there was anything else. You know what I like? When you live for a place, when you're born and you live in a place for such a long time, it's the only home you know. And then I moved to New York, and New York is super busy, and like you're always running around. So I never really thought of anything. I just kept going with life. And then COVID hit. And COVID sort of, like, the whole quarantine period, it just made me sit down, and because I didn't have anything to do, you start thinking like, oh, like what am I almost went through like an identity crisis, like where am I, where do I belong, like, that's really why I started my platform, because I felt like, okay, maybe there are other people out there that are feeling the same thing I'm feeling. So I really started MEN WEIN as a healing process for me. And from it, like, I met all these like cool individuals that have experienced the same thing. And it's like, oh my God, I feel the same way. And I also, like, I don't feel like, someone recently asked me, oh, so now, like, do you feel New York is home? Not really, to be honest. It's interesting. Like, I like the conversations that are coming out of it, and I obviously have a great time like doing the edits that I do. So like, I think it's such a privilege to be able to see outside your box.
That's true.
Like, that was the danger of living in Dubai, because like the country offered everything. So we never looked out. Like, as a child growing up, I never ever thought like, oh, what's going to happen when I have to leave, or when we leave. It was not even a question raised. I mean, I'm sure my parents had it in their mind, like, because you're bound to leave eventually. But as kids, like, we never thought of that. So it was like the only home we knew. So I think like New York, like coming to New York was like super challenging, obviously, but like very eye-opening. And I'm super grateful for it.
And for you, it must have been also a bit difficult because, like you said, it wasn't the plan, like, for it to become a final move.
Yeah.
So how did you deal with that?
I don't think I did. That's a no. So I was here for school. My plan was, or the plan was that I'd come here for school.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, so I did 3 years of design school in Dubai, and I had one more year to graduate. As a joke, like I applied to the school in New York. Like I don't know why I did that during that time, because I was about to go into my senior year, and nobody does that when you're about to go into your senior year. But I like emailed the school and they accepted me. So I'm like, okay. But after I moved to New York, I found out, like after I started, I found out I was gonna do 3 years. While I was here, my dad got laid off from work. So then my entire family moved to New York while I was still in New York.
So they're all like, we're here. And you're like, but wait, I want to leave.
I didn't even like, I obviously didn't get to say, like the byes that I sent to my friends was like, okay, bye, I'll see you in a few months when I come for Christmas break.
Yeah.
But then I didn't even like pack all my things, because I'm like, this is just temporary. And we lived in like a tiny apartment, me and my friend in New York. So I'm like, okay, I'm not even gonna take all my things, because I'm gonna go back to my permanent home.
I really were laughing about it, but that must have been really traumatic for you.
It wasn't traumatic then, like back then, because it happened so fast.
Yeah.
And like during that time, I was in a new relationship. So I was just very occupied with everything that was going on. It traumatized me now, because like then it, again, like New York got into quarantine and like forced us all to sit at home. And when you're sitting doing nothing, you're thinking. And that's what's so, I'm only like acknowledging what happened now 9 years later.
That's really hard.
And even like we used to go to Egypt frequently because we have family there, and we used to stay, like my sister and I used to travel alone way young. And Emirates airline back then, they had that option where you would give your kids basically to the air hostess. And she would fly with you and drop you off to your family or to whoever. So her and I were traveling very young alone. And we go to Egypt, stay there for 3 months. My parents would only stay a month, obviously, because they were working. So they had to go back, and we'd continue. We'd stay in Egypt. But even like in Egypt, we didn't think of it as home. We just thought of it as like the place where the rest of our family is.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was just like the summer place, and where you go see your family and you eat a lot of food, and like that's it. But it's not like,
okay,
it's not my home. Like it's just a place I'm spending the summer at. No, I went to a Catholic school, which was run like by super strict Italian nuns. And you were not allowed to speak one word of Arabic.
Oh wow.
Because they hated the idea of, for example, you and I speaking in Arabic, and like the rest of our friends have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
So it was only English, and because they wanted everyone to feel included. Like they didn't want some kids to feel like, oh, what are they talking about? Like, so school was purely English. We almost always spoke Arabic at home. So I think that's how like the language stuck.
And like at school, I imagine that it was very international, so kids from many different countries. And did they ever ask you like, where do you come from?
Not a conversation topic, but it's almost like a label. Like, what's your label? Oh, your label is Egyptian. What's your like? It was a label. It wasn't, because half of these kids, like all of us, we were mostly born here. So it wasn't like, oh, you came from India. It's like, no, you just have like the Indian label on, because like that's where you're from. And honestly, like the thing I like about Dubai, and even going to AUD, it praise like different cultures. Like the more cultures, the better. Which is a little bit different than like America, because America is like, it's having a hard time accepting people that are not white, for example.
Yeah.
But I don't think like Dubai has that problem. Dubai like encourages and like appreciates different cultures. But you know what, like in all fairness and like in all honesty too, it was never an issue like in school or in college, but only like now as an adult, and I look back at things. For example, Dubai doesn't pay every culture fairly. Like, let's say you're Filipino, for example, and I'm American, and you and I are working the same job. Some companies don't pay the same thing for you and me. I get a higher pay. So it really sucks because as a child, they're building this great idea of accept the different cultures and appreciate them and learn about them. But then as an adult, things are a bit not as fair and not as equal as it seemed. You know what I mean?
And I feel like that is something that we were very much sheltered from, or at least these were things that I never kind of took into account or realized. It is like you say, you kind of learn this and see this more as when you grow up.
I didn't recognize it until I moved to New York. Until now, I have friends from Dubai that, like, for example, would post on Facebook like a job posting. And under the job posting, she's listing like the different cultures and like the different pay. So this is like public information. This is not like a secret. And I see these Facebook statuses and I'm like, not great.
But it's funny, that makes me think, I mean, this is not really exactly the same thing, but how we live through the lens of the culture that we are in, if that makes any sense. Like, I remember, I mean, keeping in mind that I was very young, but I remember in my time, like, it was unheard of, for example, to imagine dating or, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend, or like guys and girls hanging out and holding hands. And it wasn't even an issue. It was like, for me, it was like, it's given, it's haram, it's not allowed, and that's it. And then I moved to Finland, and I remember one of the first weeks in Finland, I was like shocked out of my mind seeing like a teenage guy and girl just walking down the street holding hands. I was like, Mom, look. And it was like a shock to me. And I think it is, in some ways, you have this lens that you look through. And then once taken away from maybe even a comfort zone, you kind of, the lens is distorted and it goes away, and then you kind of see things for the way they really are.
I couldn't agree more. Like, I have a very similar story with that because in school, the worst thing you could do is obviously like if they see you, and this is like, if they see you outside of school with a guy, you're done. Like,
yeah, I can imagine that.
Like, I remember once, like, these boys were like smoking a cigarette outside of school. This is not in school at all. Outside of school, smoking a cigarette, and it was like. But then I went to college, AUD, and everybody's smoking cigarettes. The only person not smoking is me. And I remember, and my sister went through the same experience when she went to AUD and she saw like all these people and they're smoking. It was like, oh my God, they're smoking and like in public and everyone can see them.
Exactly.
And then I moved to New York and it was like,
yeah, it's another world.
It was a shock. It was a shock to say the least. But now, because like where I live, everyone talks about everything. There's no haram. And I had a post about that. Like in New York, haram. There's no haram in New York. Like everything is out on the table. And you know what? I think I prefer that. I prefer things to be out on the table and let's say the honest truth. Let's have this uncomfortable conversation rather than like sweeping it under the rug and just putting like this pretty nice face on. And
I completely agree with you. There's no point sweeping anything under the rug because everyone knows the issue is there. So like, what's the point ignoring it? Talk about it. It's true. It's all about the communication. You know,
funny because in the Middle East, like everything is taboo except for a few things. It's not like everything is open except for a few taboo. It's everything is taboo, and then there's like a few things you're allowed to talk about. But honestly, I think there's also like a lot of individuals out there and like pages out there in Egypt that are trying to break this ice, and I honestly give them so much credit, because I can't even imagine like how difficult it must be. Just even thinking of like how much kalam they're gonna hear from their parents.
Yeah.
So I give them a lot of credit, honestly.
Yeah, because it's not easy, because it's not only a personal thing, it's the community. And it's the culture of community. Like what is he gonna say? What are they going to think about you? And that's a lot of pressure on individuals.
I agree.
So you talked about MEN WEIN as this kind of healing process. So what is your vision with your page?
Obviously, I'd love to continue doing what I'm doing, as in sharing things I was exposed to as a child, or things I'm exposed to right now. So I'd still love to do that, but I'd also love it for a place, and especially for Egyptians, I'd love for it to be a place where there is no separation between Egyptians living in Egypt and Egyptians living wherever else. So, and I just posted about this, but it almost feels like, because you're an Egyptian not living in Egypt, you're almost like degraded to a lower Egyptian level. Like it doesn't make me less Egyptian than you because I don't live in Egypt. And I hate that. And I always hated that. It's like, oh, you're not from here. Oh, and I speak pretty okay Arabic. So I can't even like imagine an Egyptian that does not speak Arabic, how they're being viewed, or even better, how are they being treated by like the Egyptian culture. That's sort of my vision right now. I want it to be a place where we're not separated because we live in a different place.
I really like that, and I respect that, and that is important. And I feel like it's connected also to this mentality, human mentality of always like looking for how you are different or you don't belong. And again, like you say, labeling, like saying, okay, you are the proper Egyptian because you live in Mohandisin, but you, on the other hand, who live in New York, like, come on. It's what's the point? I don't understand that.
And actually people do it here too. Once this girl she was in my car, and again, like I told you, my playlist is like a mix of everything, and it was like, oh, you're not really Egyptian, like, because like when she walked in, like not an Egyptian song wasn't playing. So it's almost even here we're creating these levels, like how up to date are you with what's happening in Egypt in terms of art, fashion, culture, whatever. The music. If you don't love Egyptian music, then are you really Egyptian?
What, because every single Egyptian living in Egypt is only listening to Egyptian music? Is that?
The crazy thing is, I feel like Egyptians in Egypt right now are listening to like American music, not Egyptian music. But so I feel like you're right about that, and I'm not sure why, as humans, we do that. Why everything has to be like there's levels to it and you're not up to the level. I'm not sure. I don't know where that comes from, actually. I'm sure Egyptians in Egypt are also struggling, because now you see this like explosion of people that have completely westernized their life, even more Western than I am living in America. It really does upset me, because it's also, I feel like they're doing this to escape like the tightness of like the Egyptian culture, but in the meantime we're losing our culture by doing that.
That's true. I was shocked to find out that apparently many resorts forbid people from wearing hijab in Egypt. I was shocked, and a friend of mine like said it's true. Even restaurants, they didn't let her in. They said but we serve alcohol. And she said, okay, I'm 35 years old. I know that if there's alcohol, I don't drink it. It makes no sense.
Yeah, it's true. I heard that too. It's true.
But you see just the hypocrisy. Influencers who decide to take off the hijab, they get bashed on. Yet when you do decide to cover, you are not even allowed in places in the Middle East. Like it's just a little bit, but you know what? That's a whole other conversation.
That's what I'm saying. Here's an uncomfortable conversation. We ought to have it. But I feel now, like thinking of it, like, what would be the reason someone does not want to have this conversation? And I really think the only answer is because they don't want change.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't want change, you don't want to have the uncomfortable conversation. So let things be the way things are.
That's true. And I feel like also they don't want to kind of tarnish the name. Because imagine more and more people hear about this, see that it's true, and then they'll be like, it's what we talked about. What are they going to think about us? What are they going to say about us? I mean, ignoring it doesn't change the fact that they will talk about you anyway.
And I really have hope, like in the newer generation, because the newer generation will not keep quiet. They will do everything opposite of what you're trying to not do. Let's see what's uncomfortable and let's acknowledge it and talk about it, and hopefully change will come from it.
So Silvia, what is the dream?
I want to like continue and building and having the courage to talk about the uncomfortable, focus on building the courage and like the information to have these uncomfortable conversations.
Right. Through MEN WEIN, you see that there are other people like you in this kind of a situation, like a third culture kid, moving, cultural blend, hybrid, stuff like that. And I think it's also important to see that there is somebody out there who is happy and willing to talk about these uncomfortable issues. And then other people see that, okay, cool, there's a platform, we have this community here where there is no judgment and that we can have the conversation. I wish you all the success. I love your page. It's always exciting to see what you come up with next. Silvia, thank you so much for doing this. This was a great talk, and I hope we continue another time.
I'm so happy. I'm so honored to be here.
Thank you guys for watching. Please hit that subscribe button, and please go immediately and follow MEN WEIN on Instagram. The link is going to be up somewhere. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.